Hello, this is Nofal Qasim Ali Shahwan, Head of Department of Economic and Social Studies, the Center for Regional Studies, University of Mosul, Iraq. Arab food security and agricultural development policies experience of Iraq and Algeria. Arab economies had occupied detectable levels of low agricultural productivity and performance for 10 years ago compared with agro-global average up to the first report on Arab Human Development 2002. The only region organized after, for example, with lower level includes the economies of sub-Saharan Africa. On the other hand, global food markets do not bode well, and then their history involved previous crises, so the current general foresight might predict an impending crisis. Overall features display global policies which may tend to increase the production of biofuel resource as a renewable energy is increasing with the price of food. Pressure of global population growth does not lead to the goals of the third millennium of the United Nations for 2015 in the eradication of the half of the poverty, the growing global demand for foods, and most of the increase is for developing countries. An increasing basic dependence of food imports in the Arab districts has been continued for decades. A growing phenomenon has deeply contributed in Arab food insecurity. Norway led to political insecurity besides risks on society and future. Less than one-third of Arab agricultural lands counts about 160 million hectares are neglected and unused. In both Algeria and Iraq, it amounts a half of the total national land. The agricultural sector contributes about 10% of GDP and uses 25% of the whole local workforce. There is an internal dependency regarding the Arab food security. However, there is a local source, abundant but a serious and unfortunate reliance on the imports increasingly. So the question is, where does the problem put in? Is it in the agricultural land property, the water sector, the financial aspect, the regulation of the market, the awareness of the agricultural knowledge, basic type of scientific research and development, or is it in a rural development? These papers aim at analyzing main factors of the Arab food gap and drop the most important indicators of agricultural development and the policies to be adopted in focus on the Iraqi and Algerian experiments as example of source-rich economies still suffering and ultimately seeking development and growth. The options are always to confirm the need for development of Arab agricultural capacity. How? This is what the paper to discuss. Proposing many fundamental solutions, the study postulates that these often to suggest water sufficiency and land uses and recent technologies of production and integrated natural agricultural development strategy and the way to adopt the responsibility. On the problematic core of the research considers the availability of financial resources to hypothesize that the problem is an institutional, scientific, and systematic one rather than a real developmental in nature. With the case, it is well suggested the possibility of providing support and cooperation to other economies as an experiment, not to resolve it as a chronic problem in some difficult of nature. The nature of the problem. The food gap of the Arab states has been evaluated and amounted $12 billion in 2000, where population 260 million, vary but constantly growing, with current range between 30 to 40 billions dollars in year 2010, population 310 million. The value of the Arab agricultural output was $80.3 billion in 2001, less than that before 2 years. The dimensions of the Arab food gap at that year amounted for grain flour 49.9%, for sugar 66.1%, for oil and fats 45.3%. This means that the average food gap of these three strategic goods only is 50.4%. This also means that the domestic production covers only half or less of the total Arab needs. The situation has become a massive concern since it has begun worsen in the mid-90s of the past century. In order to fill the food gap, it is supposed that Arab agricultural output for 2010 to amount twice of the value for 2001, plus the needs of 50 million persons of population growth, that equivalent to 260 by 2 plus 50, that equal $570 million. This will fit for Iraq, specifically at Nineveh Governorate, which has been called the breadbasket of Iraq, the second larger district in population beyond Baghdad. The food gap were up to 75 to 80% of the overall needs of the Iraqi population in relative sense. The same matter fits for other Arab economies, for example, Syria, Algeria, Sudan, Yemen, etc. The situation for Egypt is likely most pressing. One of the domestic factors of Arab economies face in the area of globalization. The problem is not a new stretch, it is of 10 years ago. The problem is still of adverse effects when developed countries asked developing ones to drop their support to the agricultural sectors, while they themselves did not commit with it. It is expected to have negative impacts, will be doubled more and more for the Arab countries in case of developed countries reduce their support to the agricultural products. The problem becomes more serious than it can let the Arab agricultural policies with positive step in case of agricultural reforms take place. It may benefit from the higher world prices transition to cover the entire food needs locally by encouraging the Arab agricultural systems investments. In Algeria, the fall of the oil and gas production 2.6% resulted in a trend to impede the GDP growth by 3.4% in 2000 2007 versus only 1.8% in 2006. The Algeria economic growth is still driven by the growth of the hydrocarbon revenues. However, activities associated with the production has expanded to about 6% in 2006, introducing what supports the hypothesis of the potential of a growth, particularly and agricultural sector growth without the petroleum sector. The new initiative of Algerian public investment has determined to spend more than $22 billion on housing, transport, and agriculture in later years, dropping to rise employment growth in the construction sector and other related sectors by supporting household spending and improve investment conditions in the agricultural sector. This is the case on the assumption of that the most vital for food security, but it remains an indirect policy. The Arab food gap recorded in 2012 about $36 billion, which increased in 2016 to $34 billion. Despite the narrowing of food gap in light of the decline in world food prices in recent years, the Arab Organization of Agricultural Development and Development of the League of Arab States warranted that Arab countries are developing a serious problem in providing food from their local production. The Arab League for Agricultural Investment and Development, affiliated to the League of Arab States, pointed out that the food bill in the Arab world is growing year by year. It is difficult to enhance food security. The Arab food gap, cereal and meat, is widening to $53 billion by 2010 and to $60 billion by 2030. Cereals represents 50% of the Arab food gap at present. Arab wheat imports of head production bread production reached 41 billion tons in 2017, equivalent to 27% of the world's available trade, and is expected to increase to 71 million tons in 2 decades. The current output is about 27 billion tons. The Arab food gap could widen to $53 billion by 2020, up to the $60 billion in 2030, driven by population growth, water scarcity, and climate change. Imports for the year 2017 are about 70% of the Arab sugar requirements, 60% vegetable oil, and 45% of pulses. Arab land is available, water is available, and Arab sources of funding exist. How can there be a crisis of food production? The production of wheat in Iraq for 2017 has estimated at 2,974,000 tons, a decrease by 6.2% from 2016 production of 353,000 tons. In the irrigated lands, wheat production was estimated of 2,831,000 tons, that is 95.2%, and the rest become from the production of demilitarized lands. The area of land cultivated with the wheat amounted to 4,216,000 acres, an increase of 14% over the previous one. The irrigated land areas is estimated at 3,930,000 acres, that's equal 93.2%, and the rest 6.8% is the land area. 73.4 of the last proportion is cultivated in semi-assured rain lands. The average yield per acre of the total cultivated area was estimated of 705.5 kilogram, down to 14.6% from the same yield of the previous year, yielding irrigated land was 720.3 kilogram. The total production of wheat straw was estimated at 7,137,000 tons as the report of the wheat and barley for 2017. The paper dealt analytically with 4 paragraphs in the following investigations: 1. Openness and competition; 2. The element of food gap; 3. Iraqi agricultural equipment; 4. Agricultural experience of Algeria. However, all of the investment types would depend on the public policy that deals with the state investment in the sophisticated technology at the beginning, and investment climate that has to be for private investments to deal with in later stages. The model would be up to the promotion of the approach for experimental data estimation within a due course of analytical debates. At the same time, the Arab agriculture to be stand upon urgent fact, long being taken by the literature and policies concerned with the problem of agricultural sector. It can be summarized by thoughts of direct Arab jump to the economic integration and cooperation policies between Arab countries when coming to held workshop sessions, passing all the already mentioned properties, those obstacles, all technique and assemble works. This omission has continued for more than 2 generations in Iraq as well as many other Arab countries like Algeria, while policies were working on placing hopes on the Arab common treatments. In other words, all concepts of the gap posed in food and agricultural output, the policies and strategies for the agricultural sector do not portray but only the common dimension and the agreed distinctive aspects, but not solutions. Those policies cannot accept the division into joint solutions, neither close nor far, or support it. What's revealed with this fact is that exacerbate of the problem of food security as well as the problem the Arab economic reality, unless development is in various aspects of the past 3 decades or more. Hereby, each country must have self and private reliance with indigenous development, and there is nothing wrong for a little benefit from some of the successful experience and excellent for others. This does not include the diagnosis relevance with the this fact, areas of financial and technical cooperation, financial and employment potential among Arab countries, but stressed the necessity of any idea of the direction to integration in any field as a form of independence and reliability on and is a well establishing for all existing Arab gaps, particularly the gap of Arab food security. In conclusion, the public agricultural policies in both of Iraq and Algeria could not be succeed to overcome natural constraints and to reduce food gap during the 18th of the last century. The same say is for Syria, Egypt, and Sudan. The objectives have been studied and examined in depth many decades ago, while research focused on policy attention but did not reduce something or success in raising the economic efficiency to ensure verification in adequate production or modernization of the agricultural sector on the basis of modern technology. It is obvious, for reasons related, the government department and state farms besides cooperatives, while the administrative policies were political rather than economic and agricultural. Half of the agricultural land in Iraq were not exploited, while more than half in Algeria as well. The policy of distribution have to stimulate the exploitation of unused land and to be effective up to doubling the levels of agricultural production for each types of the staple crops, particularly grains. This paper concludes that the problem is institutional rather than economic one. It involved weak political will, weakness of securing the right environment of investment, weak state provision of agricultural inputs, as well as international variables. Many views imposed here for manipulations. The following options are possible and plausible, particularly for wealthy countries with abundance of finance, natural resources such as Iraq and Algeria, whereas the necessity refers to doubling the production levels to much more than twice with 1. Intensive use of advanced agricultural technology such as modern irrigation systems. 2. Developed sensors equipment that reaching irrigation water to areas by symmetric and equal distribution. 3. Least expensive techniques and most efficient technologies such as desalination of seawater and groundwater substitute for the water of land near the rain, with the following factors as certain essential technologies in doubling output. 4. Provision of organic fertilizers, policies non-chemical, with tax exceptions and exceed subsidized in the early stage of agricultural investment. 5. Supported prices of energy products involved in the extraction, transfer, and pumping of the ground. And finally, 6. Terrestrial distribution station. It is essential for the investor to be encouraged by a new agricultural lending for ease farming, tax detectable in land reclamation and ownership of modern equipment, machines, and achieving mass production as soon as possible. The outlet of the above strategy are food security and deficit remains involuntarily on one, but not imposed. It can get benefit from several past experiences to focus on the productive efficiency. On the other hand, to keep development to access external competitiveness as soon as possible. The main remedy view includes the following. When the state has to encourage agricultural investment to exploit all the available agricultural land to develop the agricultural technology in the foundations of modern and sophisticated natural fertilizers uses, machinization, equipment, and irrigation methods, which include raising the economic efficiency and increase agricultural productivity. 3. Increasing the bank's branches for agricultural lending by ease policy stand soft with zero interest rate, consistent with the proposals of Islamic Sharia and the general orientation of an Islamic resource-rich country. 4. Doubling the agricultural credit with the possible extent of expanding credits by the peasants and farmers, especially large farmers. 5. Providing customs exemptions as possible for procurement of technical equipment, land reclamation and stations and equipment of extraction, desalinations, and irrigation distribution of ground floor. 6. Expansion of infrastructure networks and basic service for rural development that double the resettlement of intensive farming families in the new land that be added and distributed to the new investors. If the case of integration of these policies with each other and coordinate the functions of financial, commercial, and industrial sectors with the agricultural and irrigation activity sector by responsible, the optimistic begins to be confirmed the possibility of final elimination of our food insecurity gap with the reduction of the cost of products and achievement of agricultural surplus country to be eligible to enter the broad market competitiveness with efficiency of the cheap conditions for the other economic sectors and desert stages of development. Thank you. Naufal.